So this is episode 8 of our Women Who Make It Happen series. Azaria, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Would you mind giving a brief introduction, who you are, what you do?
Yes.
That'd be great.
Yes, so I'm Azariah Nukajam, and I look after the investments practice at fscom, and I'm also an associate director there. At fscom, we are a GRC practice, which is a governance, risk and compliance consultancy business. And we provide a broad variety of compliance solutions to regulated financial services firms within the UK and Irish financial services industry. And we offer our services across a range of sectors, so asset management, fund management, investment advisory, and we also service the e-money and payments sectors as well. And I've been a consultant now, I've worked in financial services now for 9 years, and I've been a regulatory consultant for 6. So that's me in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you. Talking about your earlier career and how you got to where you are today, would you give us an overview and share your story?
Sure. I think my career has been fairly unconventional in terms of the pace in which I have developed within my career, but it's been fairly ordinary in terms of the steps I took to get here. So I started out my kind of early life in legal practice. So I studied both law at undergraduate level and at master's level. And shortly after I completed my master's, I went off to Asia on this program that used to be run at the time called Global Placements. And I did a bit of volunteering, but I also worked at law firms. Again, that was more so like on work placement schemes. And one of the opportunities I got to volunteer while I was off work was at a university. And at the time at that university, the curriculum was corporate governance. This was 2012-13. So this is back in the days where there was a kind of big focus on finding solutions to why there was an economic crisis, why the global sector collapsed, and what could be done from a corporate governance perspective to get firms back on track and to adopt and then foster the right culture as far as compliance, as far as transparency, and as far as just protecting the integrity of financial markets. So that was my first real taste of an idea of regulation or an idea of a career in this sector. Shortly after I came back to the UK from having done my work placements, I then landed a job at the Financial Ombudsman Service. And again, at the time, I had an idea of what the Financial Ombudsman Service was, but I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. So I looked at it from a kind of skill set perspective, and I thought, well, I've studied law, I've touched on regulation, I have an idea now what that looks like. So it'd be interesting to find out more about how it is to operate within that environment. So I started off as an adjudicator within the Financial Ombudsman Service. And for those that don't know what the Financial Ombudsman Services does, it's just a complaints resolution body that resolves complaints for consumers that are provided with services in the UK. From banks to kind of credit lenders, credit card providers. And I spent the entire 3 years there resolving complaints. As part of my kind of complaints resolution practice, it's constantly being referred to different parts of the FCA handbook and different laws. And I thought, wow, this is very interesting. This area allows me to use my skill set from my legal background, but also allows me to contribute to my sector in a meaningful way. And for me, that doing something with purpose really was a driving force behind why I kept going. So the longer I was there, the more cases I was given to resolve, the more I kind of progressed, the more I became curious about what else there is to know in relation to financial services regulation. So from there, an opportunity came up at a law firm to get into regulatory consulting, and I haven't looked back since. So I started 6 years ago, maybe 6.5 years ago, as a compliance consultant, and I am now looking after one of the departments at my current consultancy firm.
Very good. Was that always your intention then to progress a career using your degree, using law, or was it you fell into it in quite a lucky, like very valuable way?
Absolutely, a bit of both. So had I not been exposed to that sort of early concept of corporate governance and financial services industries on the whole, I would have never known that regulation exists. And I think we often talk about barriers to entry as if it's this premeditated thing or an agenda, but often it just comes from a lack of awareness. If I don't know something exists, I don't seek it out. I don't seek to pursue it. And I think from my perspective, had I not found this other side of practice, regulation, I would have continued on down the legal practice pathway with a view to then kind of going down the bar route to become a barrister. So I'd have to apply for a pupillage, receive the training, and then go into practice, into advocacy. So during the time shortly after my studies, it just so happened to be that I fell into something that is interesting, that allows me to use my skill set and my knowledge that I had developed over the four and a half years of studies, and also to contribute, come back to that point, to contribute to my profession in a meaningful way. Yeah. I didn't know that I would be where I am today. I didn't envision that I would progress in the way that I have, whereby I am working with clients, I am working with industry, trade associations to help to inform policy, responding to consultation papers, responding to the regulators when they issue discussion papers, and just presenting ideas, presenting views on proposals that come out of the regulator. Yeah. And this, where I am now, ties back to my initial objective, my initial desire right at the outset, to continue to do something that is purposeful and meaningful within the legal and regulatory kind of profession. And so, yes, my career wasn't premeditated in the sense, and I didn't have a clear view that I'd become a regulatory consultant, but I knew that I wanted to continue to remain in the legal regulatory environment, and I wanted to be able to use the skills that I had developed over that period of time. So yeah.
So I was going to ask around the motivation of what motivated you to get into it, but I think that falls into a lot of the objective, what you've just said. But what continues to keep you motivated doing what you're doing?
So I would say no 2 days are the same in consultancy. I think when you work in-house in compliance practice, so when you operate within what we call the second line of defence, the risk governance environment, you tend to have a set framework or set parameters by which you operate. Yeah. And so you find that typically you're doing the same things day in, day out, and you're answering to a pre-identified set of stakeholders. In regulatory consultancy practice, however, one day you might be working with an asset manager, you might be supporting them with the implementation of a particular governance forum or arrangement. Yeah. Another day you're flying out to a PE firm to support with regulatory due diligence. So it's the variety that I get from my job is what keeps me going and what keeps me interested in what I do, and also the challenge. I'm big on learning. That's one thing you can never stop learning. And I think when you work in an environment like the regulatory world where everything is changing constantly, you have no choice but to stay on top of it, and it keeps you on your toes. And so from my perspective, that sort of day-to-day learning and development is also a part of the broader interest that I have in the industry. And I've sort of found out now that I do like not only to support clients, but I like to do all the other aspects of practice, like meeting with the regulators, understanding what policies they are proposing to introduce into the industry, understanding what their strategic objectives are, talking about things like consumer protection. There are so many aspects of the work I do that aren't immediately obvious when you think about regulatory consultancy as a profession, but as you start to practice, they emerge and you realize it's just a world of, it's dynamic, dynamic, and I love that.
Well, the regulations are constantly evolving, aren't they? I mean, we've been running industry events that we do monthly, and we've done the consumer duty one.
That was a big one.
Done the regulator relationship one recently. Where did this drive come from? You're very driven, you're very ambitious. Where did that stem from for you?
So my mother. Often people tell me I'm like a carbon print of my mum. I think
I get the same actually.
the sort of, you don't realise actually, as you grow, as you get older, you don't realise how much the environment around you impacts who you are as an adult.
Yeah.
I think I grew up in a world, so just a bit of background, my mum is a pharmacist and she's been practicing for over 40 years now. And when we were growing up, education was really important, but it wasn't just about education. It was about, she encouraged us to be passionate about the things we do and to play to our strengths. And that was a consistent message in my household. So you aren't just going to school and getting an education and being the best in your class, but you are finding an interest in that and a purpose to that. And that is the thing that keeps you going, even when you don't feel like it. And I think it speaks, that speaks to the fact that, one, we spend a huge amount of time in our lives working. So that drive is very important. And two, having that drive helps you to overcome challenge, because you will be met with challenge. And seeing someone, my mum specifically, embody that allowed me to mirror those attributes and then kind of carry that over into my own life. And that applies to all aspects. I like to do things that I have an interest in, and I also like to do things well. So it keeps, it just kind of keeps me going in that way. Who in addition to your mother then, she sounds great, like amazing. And who in addition to her would you say has been a particular role model for you? I had a boss at my former job, Kroll, and she was a managing director. At the time, she was managing director in regulatory consulting. And I remember the first week I joined, I was put onto a job, and this job was a regulatory due diligence piece of work ahead of the acquisition of a portfolio company by a private equity firm. And I was given the instructions, you go in, you do the field work and you prepare a report, and then I was required to submit this report to that managing director. The day I submitted the report, she pulled me into her office and she said, before I hand over this report to you, I just want to let you know that I think you're brilliant. And I think if you keep going down this track, you have a bright future ahead of you. That to me was instrumental. When you work in a fast-paced, high-pressure environment, you often do not find people that, often don't find people that have the time to sit down and to encourage you. And it's not because they don't want to or because it doesn't come to mind. Often there isn't the capacity. We are busy, particularly in regulatory consultancy practice, you are often just, you're churning things, and it's around the clock. My sense of motivation, I think, and my belief, the fact that someone who is a managing director, who is also fairly young and a woman, took the time out to say, look, you can do this, and if you keep doing this, it will get you to this destination, really encouraged me to take not just my day-to-day job seriously, but my career seriously. And over the course of the 3.5 years that I worked there, this lady, the managing director, would constantly give me feedback. And it was both constructive and encouraging. And she would help me to focus on the things that mattered and to develop in the areas that mattered so that I could progress in my career, I think, at the pace that I have done and in the ways in which I have to date. And often, particularly in financial services as a sector, or historically rather, it was male dominated. It was very much, it sort of felt like a world that was often unattainable in terms of access. And the more I worked with Claire and the more I saw her interact with the industry, the more I saw her be impactful, the more it encouraged me to do something also that is impactful. And it wasn't always big things. Sometimes it was just leaving a positive impression with a client or with the regulator. So that managing director, I would say, was pivotal just in terms of inspiration and mentorship. Really was, yeah.
I think it's really powerful when you've got somebody in that position. It's aspirational as well for people like you who were developing in their career.
Yes.
I'm a big advocate of praise and encouragement, so looking at the positivity in everything.
Yes.
So
no, that really helped. It's a regulatory, financial services on the whole is very competitive.
Yeah.
You're often surrounded by people that are not only good at what they do, but they are excellent at what they do. So there tends to be a pressure there around how you develop. And it's nice to hear someone say, even if you aren't doing the best job, because there is always room for improvement, it's nice to hear someone say, I can see you are progressing and I can see you are taking the right steps. And it's also nice to see people recognize the kind of natural talent, the strengths that you have, and to support you to kind of harness those strengths and really develop into those things that are standing out about you as a person. That takes a lot of time, and that takes a lot of sacrifice on the part of the individual that's supporting you. And I think that's where, I don't know whether it's a female thing, because I have nothing to compare it to, but it sort of felt in my mind that that boss, being a woman, had something to do with the way in which we were able to relate to each other and the way in which she supported, the way in which we connected. So it's been wonderful.
Okay, really good. And if we delve into a little bit more about, clearly you've done really, really well and you've progressed quickly. So what would be the key success factors you would say that have helped you to achieve the position you are in today?
I would say two things: risk and failure. You have to be okay with failing. If you are going to progress and progress quickly, the experience itself will be a baptism of fire. You will feel the strain of your personal development. And that's a very uncomfortable place to be. But in order to be in that environment, you have to be willing to take that leap. And that's where the risk comes into it. I think a key to my success was to say, or the pace at which I progressed was to say, I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to find out. And I'm not the best at what I do, but I'm willing to do my best. And if that's good enough, and that can take me one step up on the ladder or one kind of stepping stone forward, then that's, on the risk front also, it's like, what is the worst case? The worst case is you don't get it right. And the best case is, if you do happen to get it right, it can potentially change your life forever. So for me, the not being afraid to fail, not being afraid to get it wrong, has been a big part. And then the do my best. And also there is an element of luck. Maybe I haven't touched on that. There is an element of luck when it comes to progression, because you could be ready to progress, but there may not always be those opportunities. I think one way in which I've been very lucky is that at every step of the way in my career, there has been an opportunity there that has presented itself. Not that I've created, but that has presented itself. And I've said, look, I don't quite know whether I'm ready. I don't quite feel like I'm the best at that thing. But if this person thinks that I can do it, they have seen something.
It's the belief in you, isn't it, by somebody else?
Absolutely. And then I've just kind of taken it forward, been open and willing to learn, be willing to fail, but also, again, put my very best foot forward and ask for help if I need it. Ask for help. I think that's another big one, especially as young people in an environment and a profession that is dominated, in my view, by people with lots and lots of experience. You can often shy away from wanting to ask for help because you don't want to look like you're inadequate. But I've seen a lot of value in just saying, hi, could you show me how to do this better? Or do you agree with my approach? Is there anything I can do to improve this? And that's been...
I think that's really important, isn't it? And I think that's something we can then encourage others to do? Certainly, like with team members of yours,
yes.
or like likewise the team I have here,
yes.
it's encouraging. Like, questions are good.
Yes.
You don't know until you ask a question.
Absolutely. So. And no question is too silly, because you have to get to the heart of whatever it is that is causing you confusion, or whatever it is that you're lacking clarity on. Nothing is ever too silly. And again, back to the luck point, I've just been surrounded by people that have given me the space to ask those questions and not feel silly, or not feel restrained in the way I've approached things. Yeah. So that's been good.
Good.
Yeah.
You've touched upon something. I just want to come back to it, if that's okay. So we both agree, financial services, payments, leadership roles maybe has been historically dominantly male.
Yes.
What have you seen changes in mentality or adoption of practices within businesses and institutions you've worked for, where there has been that shift?
I think you see a lot more women in senior positions across, in fact, the entirety of my career has been influenced by what I've seen around me. And what I've seen around me is women in positions of leadership and positions of authority and impact, setting strategy, setting direction of practice, and really, I was going to say presenting a blueprint, but I would say really setting the tone for how to work well and to be successful in the financial services industry. On the consultancy side of the industry, on the service provision side of the industry, so whether it's legal counsel, whether it's regulatory practice, I've certainly seen that across the 9 years I've worked in the industry, there has always been women in positions of authority and impact across every kind of part of my journey. Where I would say there continues to be challenges is on the other side, but the businesses that I work with, not necessarily challenges, what would I call them? There continues to be that culture and tradition of
traditions.
Businesses being led by men. I don't know what I would attribute that to. I can't point to one thing exactly, but it certainly has been a consistent trend that the average C-suite clients that I would engage with would be men.
I'd agree, like when you're looking at fund and asset management and the more of the established financial services entities, I completely agree.
Absolutely.
I think there's certainly what we're doing today is a great platform for us to try and encourage women to get into those industry sectors and really capitalise on all the good work that's going on. Challenges that you may have faced in your career to date, Azariah, are there any that you feel you could share with us today and how you've overcome those, whatever that challenge might be?
Yeah, this is perhaps a little bit of a sensitive area, but one that is worth, there is some value in sharing. We often, particularly more recently, talk about diversity and inclusion. And when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it's often about ticking a box to say there is a woman here or a disabled person here or a Black or Asian person here. And often what I think is missing and where we are still a little bit behind is what is at the heart of diversity and inclusion. It's not a box ticking exercise, but often it is treated as such. And the reason it is treated as such is because a lot of firms that take on DEI initiatives often do so because they need to meet certain criteria from an investment perspective. They need to attract investors by having this framework in place rather than looking to the heart of what it is the initiative is trying to achieve. as a result, even if you hire an Asian person, even if you hire a Black woman, it's not going to guarantee that those individuals will have a pleasant experience, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in industry. And one thing I've found, which I will attribute to being both a woman and to being Black, despite having access to these spaces, is visibility. My challenge around visibility, I think, is one that is unique to those two attributes. You can enter environments like C-suites, meetings, work in financial services, and you can be the only Black woman there. But the challenge you have to demonstrate your credibility and to demonstrate your worth and to demonstrate that you are someone worth listening to is quite different when you are a woman that is Black versus when you are a man that is white. It's not to say these are, again, premeditated obstacles or challenges. I think we are human, and I think we need to give each other some grace around biases. There are natural biases that occur and exist in the world in general that create the issues that I struggle with. So it's not to say that the moment you hire a Black woman, that's the end of the road. You also have to educate the people around you around unconscious biases. And I think that is a separate bit of work that needs to be addressed. And that too will come with time. I think that's not a quick fix. Even the way in which I'm treated sometimes, where it's not always, but I might speak with a client or a person about a particular topic, and the extent of surprise or shock of my depth of knowledge and expertise, in my view, speaks to an underestimation of me as a person. And again, I can at least attribute that to the two things that come immediately to mind: being a woman and being Black.
Oh, really?
Yes. But as far as challenges are concerned, again, I think that's a small challenge. I haven't had anything beyond that really play out in my career. And I think the solution is not yes, I said it's a challenge, but I don't think the solution is a short-term quick thing. It's over time we will start to see, as we are already seeing, that shift in mindset. And we will start to see people challenge their biases around people that don't look like them or come from the worlds that they
I think you mentioned it. The really important factor there is education.
Yes.
And we have it all the time with the candidates we work with. It's adhering to a D&I policy set out by an institution. Okay, well, why? And what's in place already? And it's understanding, okay, what is at the crux of that? And then what are the representations? So I completely agree around the bias, and we have to be careful around that unconscious bias, because people inevitably recruit people like themselves or work with people like themselves, but having the diversity around them, different eyes and ears are more conducive to, I think, a better performing work environment.
And you said it, and I think the education piece is around the adding, the value add. How does having a diverse workplace add value to your business on the whole? And as long as people can understand how and why, there will be a greater desire to want to contribute to that DEI aspect initiative. And I also think that there will be a shift in the way we look at the professional workplace, or not just financial services, but there'll be a shift in the way in which we look at actually professional services, career on the whole. I think as well, over time, as the industry grows, the regulatory consultancy as a profession, as that grows, hopefully we will start to see a broader pool of candidates that can come in and can represent themselves. Because the more of me and people like me, these companies see, the big financial services providers see, the more natural these interactions will be. And over time, those biases will start to be challenged and those behaviors will start to change. But that will come with time. I believe it will. And I believe that, at least from what I've seen, there isn't a strong reluctance against DEI. It's more so a gap in education that we're faced with at the moment.
And I think it's making sure it becomes commonplace.
Commonplace, yes. Part of everyday working practice. Yes, absolutely. I also think that the way in which we do the outreach piece, I know a lot of firms have graduate schemes, but I think for the regulatory consultancy world in particular, the way in which we do the outreach matters and what we focus on matters. I think more consultancy practices, without naming names, but the bigger ones should do more to get into the schools and get into the universities and share that message that there is a profession for you in regulation, and it is rewarding and it's exciting, it's dynamic, it's challenging. But there is something there that you should know about. And then we will start to see, again, that diversity. And it's, not just about going to Oxford and Cambridge and UCL, just go to other universities as well and just spread that awareness.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And I think you've touched on some really valuable things. As maybe a parting word for us today, what advice would you give to younger talent, female talent, maybe younger Black females as well, that you'd like to see coming into the industry? What words of advice would you give them?
Keep learning. The curiosity has to be there. Don't underestimate the power of knowledge to get you through the door. I think a lot of people in general, as humans, we think you have to have both skill and knowledge in order to be ready. But I think the knowledge can get you through the door. And then the skill, how you operationalize that knowledge, is what can come once you are in the job and are learning, as you go. And often we hold ourselves back and we think we aren't ready, or we think we aren't good enough because we haven't developed those skills as yet. But I think if you can, first of all, take up the opportunities that are presented to you, go to those interviews, demonstrate that you understand what's going on in the world around you, because that's really what we work with, that is where the opportunity lies. And then once you're in the role, even as a graduate scheme entrant, be willing and ready to learn and be flexible and be open to development. So that would be one. Certainly never feel like you're not ready, I think, and never stop learning. And then the other is take the risk. Take the risk, and whilst doing so, ask for help if you need it.
And I think that you touched on it earlier, the risk and the failure in learning from the mistakes. But if you don't put yourself out there and take that risk, it's like you just don't know.
You do not know. Absolutely. I think those would be my biggest ones. And we're out there. I realise as well that there are many of us, maybe this is one for me personally, I can do more to put myself out there and to be available and to present as a mentor to people that need, women that need that support. Because there are women out there that are ready to kind of take you under their wings and show you a path.
Well, thank you. And that's hopefully what we're trying to achieve by doing this today as well. So getting the message out there that there are mentors in the industry, there are people that can help and share their stories, just like you. So.
Completely agree, and you're doing such a phenomenal job. I just want to say that I'm so inspired by the work that you're doing, so thank you so much.
Thank you for being part of it.
Well, thank you.